You want me to talk now? I just didn't know if you wanted some pre-roll. Okay, all right, here we go. So, how am I? Hey there, I'm Brendan Keenan, founder, you might say, and creative director behind Art Neun. And I've been asked to sit down and tell the story and document all the lead up to what is going to be Art Neun 4. So it's a multifaceted story with lots of elements to it, and we're starting way back at the start. This is the episode 1, the how and why of Art Neun. So, it's been about a decade since I got my first Porsche, and I owned that in isolation, I might say. I wasn't part of some group, some Porsche fan base or anything like that. I would take it to work, to and from, enjoyed it, went on individual drives by myself, had no awareness, I had no knowledge that there was a subculture, you might say, of people who connected with those cars. I would also say that I'm not a guy that is a massive fan of car shows. It might sound like a very odd thing for me to be saying, and I'm being honest around all of this. I just was never really inspired by parked cars, and maybe that's why Art Neun has sort of grown and is a different sort of proposition, I suppose. I went to a couple of those when I was a kid at various gardens in the city and stuff on a Sunday, and they were okay, but they just didn't turn me on in any shape or form. So what happened was I'm living in the southeast suburbs, and I'm not quite sure what came first here, but I do remember once going to a place called Dak in Moorabbin. There's going to be some people who probably watch this video who know who ran that and who the organiser of that event was. But it was this tiny little gathering, and I mean there were probably, 15 cars or so that gathered around there, and I went there a couple of times and I knew about them. It was probably a Facebook post of some sort, and met a couple of guys, and I can't remember a single one of them, but they were nice and friendly, and I went, this is kind of cool, there's guys who've got Porsches of all types. And I do remember one conversation with a guy who lived out Geelong way, and he used to go down on a Saturday or Sunday morning early down the Ocean Road. And, he would get up, and that would be how he would sort of release himself from his weekly work. It was an outlet, and I think we all understand what that is. And so I thought, that's pretty cool, that's interesting. And then not long after that, I remember becoming aware of a coffee and cars event that was going to happen at Porsche Brighton. And I was sort of familiar with that place. It was a place that I've got to say initially when I went in, even as a non-Porsche owner, I was quite intimidated by that presence, by that location. Not that they did anything to make me feel like off-putting or anything, but just kind of, wow, here I am at a Porsche dealership, do I have to now buy a car? But I went, and I've got to say, I do remember, I remember pulling out of a driveway and coming the other direction, or coming the same way and letting me go, was a bloke who I now know is Tony Stevens, and he had the Lava Orange GT3, and he gave me a bit of a thumbs up, and I went, oh, that's kind of cool. Here I am in my 981 Cayman, and feeling like I'm a bit a part of something. And I pulled up at the dealership, got out, and then he was wonderful. We started chatting, gives a look at your car, let's have a look at a few things here, started to tell me about some other events, and I thought, wow, this is kind of growing. There's something here. With like-minded people. It was fun. They were celebrating cars. I don't know what any of them did. It was all about the vehicle and enjoying that. So Tony actually was one of the very first people who sort of introduced me to something else that was going on. And this is all around about 2017, by the way, and I was like, this is pretty cool. Now, at some point after that, I remember the next big thing I went to, and again, it was Tony creating some awareness with me and a few others, but there was a thing down at Geelong called Hangar Banger. And I know there's a number of people who were involved in it, and it was a location that was owned at that time by John Orchard. It was an old warehouse and it was to be knocked down and refurbed, which has well and truly happened. So there was this gathering, a bit of a convoy. We went down there, and it was the first time I'd really seen cars en masse. And I thought it was wonderful. And I got there and I stayed all day. I loved it. I'm sort of taking a couple of shots and whatnot. They're all pretty crappy. You're probably seeing some of them now. Nothing that was particularly inspiring, except seeing all these cars, in a single location. So this fraternity of Porsche people, let's say, were there. And it really sort of turned me on to something that was going on that I was completely unaware of. And it was pretty exciting. So then I started to look at what else was going on, other bits and pieces. And I think probably the next most significant thing from that was down at Brighton. And there's a number of locations. We seem to more recently go to the one place, but back then, 2018-ish, there were various locations we went to. And there was one place, I think it was the end of North Road, turn left, was quite a significant gathering. And I just got my car and backed it in, and there were all types of Porsches, and I'm taking the best photos I possibly can and enjoying it and talking to people. And I remember very clearly Eric Banner turned up in a Speedster and just parked it. It was in the middle row of this arrangement, parked it, left the key in it and walked away from it. I can't even recall he had a passenger. And he was just one of us. And I think that is what is so wonderful about this as well. So I was getting really quite excited about all of this stuff. So that happened. So we'd had the Hangar Banger event early in 2018. Then later there was this event of that same year with Eric Banner. And then in the January or so of the next year, Hangar Banger 2. Now this was the absolute turn on. It was at a place called Skunk Works. We drove 2.5 hours to a location beyond Colac. So there was convoys, and I remember being part of the convoy and running in and everything else. And they had pre-placed cars, and they had done a lot of work the day before. And then they had to deal with all of us turning up and parking, whatever. And it was amazing, inside, outside, all that stuff, an array. I don't know how many cars. It seemed like every Porsche in Melbourne was there. It was really cool, really cool. And then for whatever reason, this was 2019. For whatever reason, that didn't come back. And then in my world, a few things happened. Late in 2019, the car that I took to Hangar Banger 2 was stolen. And I was 20 months without a Porsche. So I was sort of away from what was going on for a period of time. And as a consequence of the break-in, some of my equipment, which was stolen as well as car, got replaced. So I ended up getting into a better camera. And so all of a sudden, something which had been residing with me since I was 16 with a 35mm camera got turned on again. So photography and cars and placement and that sort of thing really I felt was an opportunity. But things, as I said, like Hangar Banger, which I absolutely loved, just had disappeared. And we were back to going to these various events like highballs and the coffee and cars and stuff. With that camera, I did actually go and during COVID, we did go to places where we weren't allowed to go. Well, as in we had that 5K radius, but we went to locations like the top of Southland and took some photos early morning, which we were allowed to do, but just started to develop the photography a little bit more, loving it all. So that was all kind of going on. We're at sort of the end of 2021. I've now actually got into the yellow car by now. God, that's another story. But I've got my yellow Cayman, and now it's about 2022. We've come out of COVID. We're now able to do things. I suppose that whole period of when I didn't have the Porsche and COVID and everything else, nobody was doing anything, I suppose, in a sense, like they were at least anyway. So there was this night that the Porsche Club Victoria had arranged, and we were going to Lindsay's museum. And I want to make the point here that I'm not anti-coffee and cars or highballs or any of these kind of gatherings where there are barricades or they're parked, because that's it. And these are all 2-hour events. You know, we're all turning up quickly. In 2 hours, you've got to see somebody and have a chat with them, and then you've got to take a photo if you can, and you've got to check out something which is new and catch up with him as well, and all this stuff. And in 2 hours, it all gets compacted and all happens very quickly. So we went to this event at Lindsay's garage, and he had the barricades, of course. We were looking at his whole Sapphire set of cars, you know, the 918, the GT2s, 3s, Rs, and all the rest of them. He had the R at our event last year, by the way. So we were seeing that, but I always knew that, you know, like with the camera, there was a barrier between me and the car. It couldn't be as creative. They were sort of tucked in a bit tighter than what I'd want. And I was at another event, so I was down at Elwood, and I remember being there, and I was just standing there with Joseph Armstrong, and I said, we need something. And I felt like I had been waiting for somebody to do an event, like the Hangar Bangers, like particularly the second one, or whatever else it might be. And I just knew with my visual background that I could do this. And I stood there with Joseph Armstrong. I said, doesn't look like anybody's going to do this. I'm going to do it. And I decided. And there's this photo that was taken on the day, the same day. It's in October, I think. Lee Norrie took the photo. And it's just me walking. I'm coming out of the car park, but I'm walking with haste, with purpose. It looks like I just decided right then I'm going to do it. I'm going to create a thing. And the name Art Neun wouldn't have even been on the radar. That was all developed at some point later. So I was like, I'm going to do this kind of car show thing, and it looks like I've walked out of the car park and walked straight to the desk to start doing the work. You can see in the shot, I'm in motion. I look like I've got purpose, and I felt like I sort of at that point I did. I just said out loud, declared, Joseph, I'm going to do something, and we're all going to celebrate and partake in it. So this is all about the cars and having them elevated. I think, as a brand that produces the two-door sports car, for all the events that we were going to and partaking in, I felt like we still needed to sort of raise them up even higher. You know, doesn't really matter where they put the engines, the cars are what is central. And I don't care also what condition, you know, how good, how bad, how expensive, how not. It was something I always thought everybody should partake in. So that was the drive, and I decided, right, I've got to do it. Didn't know when exactly. It was just, I've got to get on with it and start doing this stuff. So I started to look a little bit as to what was going on overseas. There was Destraffen up in Thailand, which I've been to, as it turns out. But back then I was wondering what it was. There was an event in Dubai. We certainly know about Lufterkult. And I think in particular, the bit that I always felt we needed to do, and this is, I went and grabbed this actually just from downstairs before. This is Vanity Fair, September 2024, and I thought there'll be a car ad in here, and it might be the sort of thing I want to do. So if you think about coffee and cars and what we were doing, and then I'm leafing through this book, and I get to almost the very front of it, and lo and behold, exactly what I see in my mind is right here in this Land Rover ad. So the way that's been staged by a creative team, I just know that there's been a lot of thought go into that. The flowers in the pond, the colour of the wall behind it, the colour of the car, all the stuff. So I wanted to do a show that sort of looked like that, let's say. Took that into consideration and brought that to life. And the bit that goes with that for me is that we just looked at that car from this angle with that set backdrop. But my thought is, how does it look when you also look at that car from that direction and this direction, and what about the one going that way as well? So it's a 360 consideration. And then the bit that goes with that is, how do we then integrate it with a second car? What might be the arrangement? You know, how, why, all the stuff that goes into it. That is where a lot of the work goes into. What is the set, what is the location, and what is the car, and how's it going to be, and how do you experience it in a 360? Because that thing in that magazine is sort of easy. It's a single dimension. It looks great this way, but what happens if you were taking a nose or a tail shot of that car from the other directions, or looking back toward the camera? And that's the bit that I sort of try and drag in. And clearly clearly that's not what can happen when you turn up at a car park on a Sunday morning. You've only got 2 hours, and that's not what those guys are doing, and I partake in those and love them. But this was about doing something differently, okay? And I also thought, wouldn't it be great if we could do this and we didn't have to travel? i.e., plenty of us are fortunate enough to be, and I haven't done this, Goodwood or the like, but do I have to go to Thailand? Do I have to go to California? Do I have to go to the UK, Europe, whatever, to experience this? What if some guy decided, let's do something in Australia, let's do something in Melbourne. All we've got to do is put our cars forward and he'll do the work, and we can all partake and celebrate. And let's not do it in 2 hours. Let's do it in a longer form, a 6, 7, whatever it is, 8-hour day, whatever it might be, so you can do all the things that we try and do on a Sunday morning, but do them, say, properly. So have a complete conversation, have a coffee, have a meal, look at the cars, take photographs, and then go and do it all again. Don't ever feel rushed. You get there, you can take your time, absorb it, enjoy it. If you want to come as a spectator and come for an hour and stay for 3 or whatever it might be. But it was all about a slower version of that. And let's stage the cars, and let's have music, and let's have some food there and some beverages or whatever, and enjoy each other's companies, enjoy the car and elevate them. And that's really what sits behind all of this whole thing. And so when I started to look just beyond that, one of the things that I, like probably all of us, look at Luftgekult for inspiration as well. And this is the book they produced, which is the first one. And I only recently acquired this, but I want to show you something because in another later episode, we're going to see what Art Neun looked like for those who are unfamiliar with it. But there is a single. Well, this is this book, by the way, which is quite thick, and I'm assuming you can see it right now. But I'm going to show you this. Like with all these pages, this is Luftgekult 1. It's that few pages. But there's one shot in particular, which is this big black and white shot. Now, assuming you can see it, but it's just a whole ring of cars in a circle. That's Luftgekult 1. That is what they started with, and we know they're a global phenomenon. I went to Japan and saw it, but when I saw that, I was so inspired that you can just start somewhere and you can turn it into something else. So I've gone now from a person who looks all the time. We want to stage stuff, just like we saw here. We want to probably do it better than they did in that Luftgekult book 1, and we did. And also, I did not want to waste architecture. So, you're looking right now at a high, wide shot of a beautiful red brick building. You can see, and there's cars everywhere, but for me, it's too cluttered, too crowded. And cars could have been parked against walls and probably done that differently. But this is, again, an overseas event that I'm looking at, a photo I found that I use as a bit of a reference point as to what we are not. So this is the story of the how and why. It's about the celebration of the car. It's about rolling them through. And as a person who would drive the streets and look for funky locations to take shots on my own car, of which you're seeing a few examples of now as well, I've gone from somebody who all of a sudden stopped looking for places to park a single car. I'm now looking for places where you can park 50 to 100 cars. And given that I've just decided to get on with it and do it, I'm now searching Melbourne for the location for Art Neun 1. Okay, Stefan, I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but I just thought this might be valuable, whether or not you're going to put this in something later on. But we've just recorded episode 1 for your piece, and it's late July. Art Neun is effectively 4 months away. I've woken up this morning with a shitload of anxiety. I still don't have the location confirmed. The location, as you're going to see in this documentary, or as you might even know, depending on where this gets dropped in, if it does at all, there's a location which is fantastic, but it's for sale, and I've got no control over getting to the people who are the buyers, and that's where the hold-up resides, you might say, between the seller and the buyer, and I'm not their priority. So I'm sort of anxious. Okay, I don't really have a plan for number 2, so I do sort of think what would happen if they said no, or if they said to me, oh, we can't tell you again for a month, and so I'll just get further down the road. Now at this point, given where I've been in previous years, I'm in some ways well behind. I've got a lot to do already, and now it's just building. So I'm sort of dealing with this. So because this whole thing's about being pretty brutal and honest, I'm just telling you what's going on. I'll say this. It's funny because I think the older you get in life, I think you reference things from your past and they help you stay afloat, let's say. And this morning I was thinking about this, and I've probably done this before with stuff, but this is going to sound odd, but when I had my 20 years or so at Channel 7 as in sport, there was a time, it was after the Barcelona Olympics. So the Olympics kind of go up and down, but Barcelona was 1992. And the Olympic Charter required that they get more in rights for the Olympics from the broadcasters than they did the previous Olympics. So every year, every 4 years, the host broadcasters are paying more. And this became a sticking point from, as I recall it, for broadcasters who did not want to pay more than they did for Barcelona, than they did for, were being asked to pay for the Atlanta Games in 1996. And as we know, the Sydney Games happened the 4 years after that, Sydney 2000. So you got this kind of 4-year window. And I remember it felt like the date for should have signed up somebody to do the broadcast rights for the Atlanta Games had not happened. And it was almost like, my God, there is so much work that needs to be done by the broadcaster and everything that goes into that, which is an enormous project. And it felt like it was at the point where, regardless of what happens, there's no way you could actually commit to a broadcast and deliver it. And as it turns out, my boss, Gary Fenton, who's departed a couple of years ago, he negotiated with the IOC to get the Atlanta Olympics 1996, and he bundled into that package Sydney 2000. The first broadcasters in the world to do a multi-Olympic deal. So he was a smart guy, he knew Sydney was going to be a cracker in Australia, just like 32 will be in Brisbane. And he knew that, and so he committed to do 96 and 2000. It's not the story. The story is not about how we bundled the things. It was the shitting yourself bit that came with, holy crap, we've got to do our games out of Atlanta and we've got no time to prepare for it. And right now, I've got this event number 4 and there's momentum and shitting myself. Got a lot to do. And only I know that. The people I'm dealing with don't understand how much work I've got to do, prepare, because I'm trying to make a seamless event. I want everybody to come in and just go, wow, wonderful. And to do that, you've got to do a lot of preparation and get it right. And I know what's required. And at the moment, I'm on the starting blocks and it's all ahead of me. I'm looking down the straight of the 100-metre final, and I'm just waiting for somebody to fire a gun. And I'm just waiting. I've done all the training and I cannot do any more. So on this journey, I am going to have moments of anxiety, and I've had them in the past because I'll get a yes or I'll get a no, and there'll be a solution, and then there'll be another problem and another one. And while everything's going smoothly, I've got to jump these hurdles at the moment. So right now, I'm not feeling quite the anxiety right now that I was, say, 3 hours ago, but it's pretty real, and it's just something that you got to deal with. And I sort of said to myself earlier today, why am I doing this? Like, why am I subjecting myself to some of this pressure? Why am I putting it on myself? I'm not asking the question with an answer. I'm just going, this is stressful, and it's pretty kind of real. I don't want to give up. I don't want to give into it, but it's just part of something that I sort of have to live with while I'm doing this event. Anyway, it's just everybody. By the way, everybody deals with stress. It's just me verbalising it. That's all. Just being open.